Awesome. So thank you for joining us. First off, I'm David Lublin. I'm one of the developers and support people at VIDVOX.
And I'm Cornelius Henke, ProjectileObjects, also one of the support people at VIDVOX. And here we have Nica Ross, a Pittsburgh-based artist now, and current director of the Frank-Ratchye STUDIO for Creative Inquiry.
And we're also joined by Chris Jordan, who is my friend here in New York City, who runs one of my favorite events, Geek Christmas, which we'll talk a little bit about tonight. But before we get into it, I'll quickly just say, usually the way that we're going to do these is we'll start with some quick introductions where you can kind of talk about yourself, give us, the 10,000-foot view bio out of your own mouth, and then we'll do individual interviews. So we'll start with Nica and then we'll move to Chris. But if Chris wants to jump in with any questions during the process and vice versa, all on board, you are a temporary interviewee during the, yes, you understand. And then we'll switch to more of a group kind of a conversation. And I've got a bunch of topics for that. Yeah, so Nica, do you want to start off? Just tell us a little bit who you are, what you do, how you got here in life.
How did I get here? Oh my gosh, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Nica Ross. I use they, them pronouns. And the other part of my paid work is that I'm a professor of video and media design in the School of Drama at Carnegie Mellon. And I will admit that I didn't necessarily see myself being in a drama school, but now that I am in one, it makes a hell of a lot of sense. I studied film in undergrad, and then in grad school, I studied photography because at the time, I was looking for a graduate degree that would allow me to make live media performances. And interestingly enough, photography was like the space where, expanded photography and, ways of incorporating lens-based practices in live performance was being explored. And, luckily now I am part of a duo alongside Lawrence Shea, where we teach a program that I really wish had existed when I was going to grad school. That's called the Video and Media Design, MFA. And there's also an undergrad version at Carnegie Mellon where we, teach media for live performance. And I guess the bio of all of that is that, wanting to, in undergrad, when I started studying film, I definitely loved playing with film and video. I was very blessed to grow up with an artist's mother who worked in theater and in film. And so the toys around the house, like literally games, were making stop motion animations. Like that was like how she kept us busy. So, I had a practice, a playful practice as a child, and then went and was like, I'm going to go be serious in undergrad, but found that I just was so like, I don't want to just sit here and press play. I want to do something. I want to, I don't know. I had also practiced, I was playing music in high school a lot, so there was that component of live performance that was really missing for me. And so then I understood that nightlife, there was this growing presence in nightlife of live visuals. And so that was something that was kind of I want to do that. I want to the term VJ had been kind of ruined by MTV, but I knew that I did still want that role, but not the way that MTV did it, not just playing music videos. And then, so I pursued that quite a bit and I worked in adult film production in San Francisco for a while at kink.com. And it was a great community of artists and really amazing people. And, you had access to the tools for creation. So you could take the cameras out for the weekend and shoot a weird film with your friends and, help I worked on so many of my colleagues' short films and things like that as well. It was just and everyone could build everything. It was just a fantastic world that also made porn, and everyone involved was fantastic. Porn can be a very wonderful place. And yeah, I'm going really deep in here. I don't know how long you guys want this, but
we've got time. We're going deep.
Then I went to grad school. Then I had an incredible mentor who was the head of the program, Nayland Blake, who's also a performance artist, and really leaned into being able to not just take myself seriously, but also take myself lightly at the same time. And express joy in art making and express the ways of sharing and, collaborative space and time making with people. And that, what I really love about live media is like collaborative phenomena making, that there's just, like the ephemerality of live performance is a big part of it. But then there's just like so many accidents that you didn't see coming, and it's just amazing. And that's something that so the origin of VDMX, maybe that's how in my practice, that I can close on that and then let someone else speak. My sister's also really into theater, go figure. We have a great mother. My dad's into public transit, and I also love buses. So really into public transit too. But it's just, not the career avenue I took. But my sister took me to a show by Big Art Group and Caden Manson, and it blew me away. It had all these live cameras. They were telling this story of this internet story of crazy Craigslist encounter and everything, and using these tools of mediated storytelling. I had already had this kind of bug in me of I was doing visuals at parties, and I was trying to figure that out, but I was using QuickTime. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I was also using 16 millimeter projectors. I'd lug 4 of them to a party and have 16 millimeter projectors.
Wow.
Which, I did not have a car. I don't know how I got them there, and I really don't remember, but I must have a friend. And then I went off to grad school, knew that I wanted to pursue this, and I reached out to Caden and said, hey, can I intern with you? And Caden was like, yeah, come on over. And so, awesome human on this planet, and teaches at Sarah Lawrence right now, or is the head of the theater program at Sarah Lawrence right now. So shout out to Caden. And then he was like, I have this one problem on this show that we're, in tech, and I want a live data mosh. And, I was full of hubris and gumption, and I was like, I can figure that out for you. And I was not very technically proficient at data moshing at the time, and I was rather young as a practice. I think it was Takeshi Murata had just come out with it, and then I found this Quartz Composer plugin
from Bang Noise
that would only work in VDMX. And so I did this. I didn't even know about VDMX at the time, but I did my research, and Caden was using Isadora, and I had, learned some Isadora at the time, but I was like, I can't get it to work in Isadora, but I can get it to work in VDMX. So then I literally sat hidden on the set, and they'd switch to me with VDMX on my computer whenever they needed to do the cue of data moshing, and I had to drop an iframe manually to do it. But then that meant that I was this very unique cue, one person cue in this show that was probably under the radar. It was probably in January or something. Yeah, and so through that, Caden bought a VDMX license, and I got it on my computer, and then I just started VJing all the parties, and I threw a lot of parties.
That's amazing.
So that's the origin story.
That is a fantastic origin story. I only have one question, and then we'll go to Chris. What instruments did you play in high school?
I played so before high school, I chose in 5th grade or whatever, oboe.
Oboe.
Because there was all these pictures of instruments, music, and I was just oboe.
Oboe.
That's the coolest word. And I liked bassoon, but it was so big and I didn't want to carry that. So I did oboe first, which is a horrible instrument for a child to play. I don't recommend it. And then I switched to trumpet. And then I was very serious about trumpet and played jazz trumpet and went to jazz band camp every summer and
Okay. Right
but
on.
I wouldn't recommend
the
listening to me play anymore. My embouchure is shot.
That's okay. One other thing I will mention before this is, if at any point you just want to say reference a thing that you want us to insert later on, you could just be here's a picture of me, and then you could send us it later on and we'll insert it there. So if you want to be oboes flying all around me, we'll do our best to stick in some flying oboes around.
And I go, oboe!
Oboes! Which is a particle oboe effect or something there. But yeah, at any point, just be move your head out of the way and be this is where that image is going to be inserted, and we'll do our best. Send us the stuff afterwards. So, Chris, basically the same question. Who are you? Tell us about, how you got here, everything you want to tell us about you're getting started.
Yeah, thanks. And just thank you for hosting, David. This is such an honor to do this. And we got to see Vade in the first one, and it's like, oh, like changing people that changed lives, and people that I'll never be able to repay for how they've changed my life. You're on that list, So I'll be a little briefer maybe. I grew up in Minneapolis, and in college I wanted to get my hands on any tech I could. I saw some early 60s light show guys kicking around, and they were just like, what?
In Minneapolis?
Yeah, in Minneapolis. There's a whole scene in Minneapolis. I mean, there's a scene of the old light guys everywhere if you dig hard enough. But connected with them early. But in college, I knew I majored in art history and design, and as a way to get my hands on more tech. But that sort of showed me the art history of technology. Really going back to like some of the major influences to me were like Moholy Nagi's scintillators, that like the Guggenheim, like these, and and hearing these people say like, in like 1920, this is going to be the art of the future, and then like looking around and going, yeah, where is it? Like, come on, let's go. So I started volunteering at a place, because similar with you, that rented out 16 millimeter film projectors and had like large format projector film developing or photography developing, called the Minnesota Midwest Media Artists Access Center. And every Monday night, I would rent out equipment to people doing amazing things with it that I never really got to see because the internet really wasn't around. This is like the early 90s. And there's one guy that came in there from New York, and he came to Minneapolis because he could get access to, real cheaply, to a large format photography studio. And he'd come for like a month every year and just like live in this studio because it was the best place for him to develop his film. And that got me thinking about New York. So when I had an opportunity after college to come to New York in the late 90s, I jumped and then slowly sort of found my community of media artists. And mostly, a lot of it was having to do it ourselves, hauling those projectors around and creating those communities. And what I've gleaned since then, doing all the VJing and all the, live parties for years and years and years, is the art is for me is more about the community now. So one of the things I started like 22 years ago, David, I will talk a bit more later, I guess, is this tech swap that I've been hosting. And, that's like just like one of the things that has inspired me to, keep connections with people. And, that, Nica, you were talking about the ephemerality of our media and our mediums. And for me, that really ties into the tactile aspects of and access, really, because it's, for me, this art has always been about politics. There's a saying, there is no art without politics. It's whether you choose to engage it or not. So for me, access to these things has always been part and parcel to the politics and the message behind what we create. And that's always sort of led me to avoid too much computer, because that can be an opaque space that an audience, like doing things with cameras going into a computer and then to a projector. Or, Nica, you had a great phrase for it. I wish I remembered. It was something like optic lens work or something like outside the projector, What was that?
Maybe when I referred to lens-based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that too. That was a good one.
Yeah.
I love that. But that to me ties in with like John Cage's prepared pianos. It's work downstream from the sound that can be a visual in for audiences into, what you're doing. So yeah, and then VDMX has been a part of that because, it's like the best Swiss Army knife there is for, ins and outs and all around. So yeah, now as I get older, I'm working on more sculptural things and kind of getting more classic with tying in with ephemerality. And I've been making a lot of work using that looks like video that is completely analog. And yeah, that's just sort of where I'm at lately. I think because I'm tired of hauling around projectors and climbing up ladders and,
Yep.
uh,
Yes.
but I'll be doing that until I die anyways. It's who we are,
You
right?
can't avoid it. I pulled my
Yeah.
back out this past summer doing Pittsburgh Noise Fest. Like, sent myself to physical therapy, but it was a great show.
I'll also just note, since you had mentioned QuickTime Player before, Nica, in my early shows, we were literally doing video sampling with Final Cut Pro, and we would switch back and forth between whether or not we were doing DV capture or DV out in Final Cut Pro, and then like scrubbing on that with a video mixer so that we could like cut back and yeah. So like it's and I definitely had my days where I think I did one show in my college days where literally I was doing the visuals by changing my desktop picture on my secondary screen, and I would just change that, and then I was just writing in stickies. And I was like, I think the event was called Martian Karaoke, and I was just like, I was writing lyrics for people to sing in stickies, and then I would have to just move those back off screen and move some new stickies on screen. And like one of the best shows I had done, at that time.
Yeah.
Just
That's wonderful.
when there's a means, it doesn't matter if it's, it was in a dive bar, but it was, a great show. Anyway, I feel like we're all kind of a little bit of that like vibe and scene, and that's totally fine. Well, that was wonderful. Thank you very much. So yeah, let's move on a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about working at CMU, how you got to that point, taking over in what is kind of a very well-known studio, if I was going to be applying to a grad program, that's where I would be going, right? Well, I would be applying to your program, essentially. So tell us how you got there, how taking over for another legend, and yeah, all about that.
Yeah. So I'll say, the Studio for Creative Inquiry is an entity in and of itself. So it's the Frank-Ratchye Studio for Creative Inquiry. Ed Frank and Sarah Ratchye are alums of Carnegie Mellon and continue to support and have an incredible art collection themselves. It's, I think they could make a museum of like absurd art that kind of like, I can't even describe all of it, but yes, highly recommend looking up the collection of Ed Frank and Sarah Ratchye. And Sarah Ratchye is also a painter as well, came out of the School of Art. So the studio itself began in like 1989, I want to say, but it wasn't called the Studio for Creative Inquiry at first. It was called the Center for Art and Technology. I might be a year or two off. I don't have my notes. But, you can look it up on our website. The information is there, and it is accurate. And then it was transformed into the Studio for Creative Inquiry when a new dean and a new head of the School of Art came from MIT. And Lowry Burgess was the dean, and the name is escaping me of the head of art. But Lowry's known for making like space art for like, among many things, a kind of Fluxus-oriented style teacher and educator and thinker as well, thinking in a lot of like different prompts and also, instigating ways to like use technology and art together. And so they modeled that studio after another studio that was at MIT that also was this kind of, one of the things that I like to think about it in terms of like an academic complex is that it's like it's antithetical to like the purpose of academia, and that there are no actual units offered in the Studio for Creative Inquiry. You cannot get a degree from the Studio for Creative Inquiry. You cannot attend a program in the Studio for Creative Inquiry. We are not a tuition, sourced entity. We are a bit precarious in the importance because of not being a non-revenue generating entity, but it's also the secret superpower because we can have workshops, we can do things that are outside of the regularly scheduled program. And in so doing, create space for people who need to be outside of the regularly scheduled program, especially in the College of Fine Arts, where we are located technically in the structure under the dean's office in the College of Fine Arts. And so there's 5 schools, and then there's a couple like weird things, kind of like us, and there is the ICA Pittsburgh, which is the gallery space, art space, and then there's also this program. Too much information, but we are up in the dean's office, and we serve not only the College of Fine Arts, but we also serve the entire university. And then what has been also a goal of mine throughout my time is to also serve Pittsburgh and the region, and also be a space where people can come and have a way into campus. So, we do welcome non-affiliated CMU people to come take workshops and to participate. And, one of the things, I've worked with both you and Neil on different events that the studio has done, including Live Performers Meetup and Art and Code Live. And those were open to the public. And there were people who, traveled from Ohio to go to those things. And I just want to say, I'm so proud of that time, because I am still seeing the impact. I am still hearing from people and seeing people, really, building networks of support, networks of creative inspiration, also just getting each other gear, that came out of just trying to make a reason, a space, and a time to meet up, and a shared passion. And, Pittsburgh has had spaces like that. I loved hearing about the Midwest. I'm going to mess up the name from Chris, with the Midwest Collective. We need those kind of spaces. And so, that is one of the ways that the studio operates, but also the studio is, very much a research institution, and is, primarily in an R1 research university that's known as a techie university. We are the, creative research laboratory, and we support through grants a lot of research at CMU itself. And so it's also about platforming. What the hell is creative research? What are we doing? So that's a big part of it. But, my other home is also the School of Drama, which, it is a separate unit and entity in and of itself, though it is served also by the studio and its amorphous offerings as well. But within the School of Drama, we're the oldest drama school in the continental United States of America, or I think even in North America. And, Western drama school in that context and in that definition. I'm sure there have been many people teaching many people about performance for a very long time. But, we are over 100 years old, older than the university being made into a university when it was more like separate colleges. And so there is this we are a drama conservatory, and then there's the media department who are yeah, we didn't exist when this university started, And so that's also this great tension. I love tension. I love friction. And that out of that, are a lot of instigations around, well, then what does theater even mean? What are we actually doing? And so those are my two institutional spaces. Yeah.
Well, since you had mentioned fluxism there, what is even art? That's kind of the whole gist of a lot of this. It's, where are the boundaries between the different things that we're doing and the concept of art itself, performance art. And yeah, I feel like a lot of what even VJing as a concept is a breakdown of so many of these different existing barriers of what is the definition of art? How is remixing and things like that play into it? Are kind of some of the questions that have been, put forth by our industry.
It's hard to even work in that space without asking those questions, because at the end of the day, we have years and years of putting light on walls, making art, and it is almost impossible to document and photograph and, record accurately. It is that theater.
Yeah.
It is that live thing, especially as, the technology gets more and more, brighter projectors that can cover higher resolution, more space.
Yeah. I also want to cite the correct name. So that it was the dean was Lowry Burgess and the School of Art head was Brian Rogers. And they are the two folks who started the Studio for Creative Inquiry.
And what year?
They started
1920.
1989 is when they named it the Studio for Creative Inquiry. 1985 is when the Center for Art and Technology started. The space we occupy is the former library for the College of Fine Arts, which I also feel like libraries are incredible radical spaces, and that just feels right, that it's about access.
Yeah. And actually, I think both of you and my own personal experience have touched on the concept of access, just having access to the equipment. Chris said, he had access to some equipment all of a sudden, and that was the big breakthrough. And for me, when I was in college, RPI had this amazing equipment room, and we were friends with the guy who ran the equipment room. So when literally one of my best friends, one of my roommates, we wanted to throw a party, and we went down to the equipment room. We were like, we want 5 projectors. We want, these video mixers. We want the big Mackie speakers. And, one of the professors was like, we can't just give you all of this stuff. What do you want this for? And like, oh, we're throwing a party. And they're like, we can't just give you this for a party. And then my roommate came home, drew a floor plan of our entire apartment, showed this is where the projectors are going. We're going to put the lipstick cams on the DJ's arms during the thing and have the projectors go up, and went back to the equipment room, showed them what we were doing. And they're like, all right, here's all of that equipment that you asked for. And like, that was only possible because we had that access.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, having to justify ourselves. And I should say, part of your question I didn't answer, which is that how I got to CMU. And I'll say that my number one rule on like work was that I wanted to work places I had access to equipment. And so I actually started as the AV staff person in the School of Drama. And I knew about the job because Caden Manson had just started teaching a few years back, but the MFA directing program at CMU. So it was on my, I was conscious of its existence and that they had this media program. And so then, I was freelancing and adjuncting in New York, and basically not living with much money, very, very little money. And life was very expensive. And I was like, Pittsburgh, and I also was dating someone in Pittsburgh who I'm still dating. And so that was also very wonderful, attractive for me. And so I started as the AV staff person. So I was like, yay, there's projectors and stuff. And it turned out I knew how to use them and started teaching students pretty early on during my time, and moved into a teaching position.
That's a
really fun gig I did was up in the Bronx. It was the roots of hip hop. It was we projected footage of the original public events.
Yeah.
On the playgrounds and courtyards where they happened. And it was just beautiful, right? And then people spoke and talked about it. And what I learned was a lot of hip hop came out of access to turntables and access to equipment. And, they came about in nefarious ways, let's say, but, they got access to turntables that weren't theirs and they could scratch on and do things to, and really and that's a visible art, and projectors. David, I remember taking them from startups to parties, out of the company, and and then coming in early and slipping it back in and I'm going, I don't know why it's on AV4. The settings are all wonky. Here, let me fix that real quick, So there's so much of this art and technology is about that access. Yeah. And, Nica, that's been one of the inspirations for me of the center, is like how they give that and give it so freely there.
Yeah.
For me, it was like, we gotta start sharing it, and I'll go into my spiel about Geek Christmas.
Yeah, that's great. That's perfect segue, actually.
Because that to me is just like I'm one of my mediums.
Well, first off, explain Geek Christmas to everybody, because I want to say this is one of these things where I am afraid that once word gets out about it, everyone's going to want to come, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I want also people to hear this and be inspired to do it in their own local communities. It is such a great thing, and that's one of the reasons I want to have you on here about this. Yeah, so go ahead. Explain what Geek Christmas is, how it works. Yeah.
Yep. And we'll do there's time lapse of it because, cameras and everything. So it's Geek Christmas is coming together of artists and creators in the broadest sense of that definition to give away to each other their excess stuff, whatever that is. So it's not public, and it takes place in different people's homes or studios or wherever, to give each person a chance to not have to haul out their big stuff. The rules are you stand up and you offer your thing, and if somebody wants it, they get it. If more than one person wants it, the group often will say, what are you going to use it for? And the group decides whose need maybe makes more sense and sort of who's been taking more stuff. If nobody wants it, you get to bring it home. So it really encourages bringing good stuff. And because we all kind of know each other and it's grown into a community of folks, we're all really pushing to get rid of stuff, like especially as I get older and I'm like, I don't need all this crap. So we're really, it's almost like become, now it has this aspect of a generational thing where there's younger folks who are like, oh my God, an MX50, let me go with this thing. And you're like, yes, please take the MX50, find some love there. Right. And the idea has always been to serialize it. So Nica, if you want to start this at the Frank-Ratchye, that would just be the coolest thing ever.
I mean, I got a buddy in Pittsburgh, I think can help me.
Yeah. And you have access to a cage, which is just like, are you kidding? The stuff that universities accumulate and collect, right? So
well, that is literally happening right now. So last year I invited the artist Ben Gaulon, who goes by Recyclism, who's out of France. And he also is one of the co-creators and runners of No School Nevers, which is just like the most joyous gathering I've ever been to. Highly recommended if you can get to Nevers, France. But it's a great 2 weeks in a small town playing with gear. But he came and did a workshop, and it was really fun because he came for like a whole week beforehand. And we went around to we went to an e-waste facility. We went to, oh God, what is it even called? Like a swap meet. We went to, used stores, like Salvation Armies and things like that. We just went shopping and got so much stuff. And then the workshop was this creation of this like machine, this like hybrid snake-like machine that everything was interconnected, electricity or signal flow or anything, and it just like kept spanning and spanning and spanning, and everybody who was a participant got to like solder things together, and there was just this like massive thing. And you can go to the Studio for Creative Inquiry website to see some photos of that. But that was one of the workshops that has instigated more, and right now we have a CMU staff member who had come to that workshop named Wiley. And he is Wiley. He is finding all the e-waste on campus. It is incredible. And so we have him set up in this little desk at the studio, and there's a lot of stuff, like to a point where I'm just like, oh my God, what do we do? And just so you know, Neil, we will have a giveaway time next semester. You will be invited. I've already taken some stuff. He's because there's stuff that's just like not useful anymore. And it sits in somebody's laboratory and it's just not used. And yeah, I feel the same way. Like things should be used, and I've definitely given away choice finds because I knew I wasn't using it. And I just needed to see it go to someone who would use it,
Yeah, and that altruism that I get, seeing the homes that things get. I mean, that MX50 story, an MX50 ended up at Feed, and I'm sure we all know what Feed is. And if we don't, David, that's got to be an upcoming one.
We're going to have we'll be having a Benton and Feed on at some point.
And an MX50 went up to Feed, and a young gentleman said it saved his life. Like, was so down after the pandemic that this was a thing to sort of bring a person out. Like giving stuff away at this tech swap is, for me, all of it. Like I go on walks every day. I see something in the neighborhood. I know this object has a carbon footprint. And if it doesn't get realized in its life, it's wasted. We created that pollution to make that thing for no reason. So everything has a lifespan. Everything has that arc of its usefulness. And it's so cool to see the younger folks getting into the old tech and giving it things new life. I never thought I'd see like, are you kidding me? You want to do what? Yeah, I bet.
Wiley gave me this, and it's an iPod that has a camera on it. And so I was like, well, fuck, I gotta take that.
Yeah.
I have a charger. Of course, I don't give away the cables. That's one thing.
You got, I think, what was it? Probably I'm at the point where I've got enough DVI cables where I might be bringing some of those. Not all of them, but enough DVI cables where might be a few of those at Geek Christmas this year. But I got this great Rode microphone that I'm using now. I got that at Geek Christmas. Somebody was just like, like you're saying, I need it to find a good home.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to use this, and that's really the ethos of it. And it's worked out really great.
And every community should do it.
Yeah.
Like,
I just want to add, 1 year that I went there, though, one of the things that somebody brought was just a bag full of really nice wigs. So it's not like this all electronics.
Yeah, that was me.
No, there was something else though. Okay.
Heather brought wigs.
Yeah.
Or two times bags of wigs were given out. But yes, Heather would have brought wigs. But yeah, I found like 12 of them in new packages on the street, like all bright colors. And of course, we have a photo, like the whole table and everybody's got a wig on. It's beautiful.
That sounds like a perfect tool to me.
Yeah. So it's really anything that a geek would want, not just an electronics giveaway.
Yeah. I mean, the old famous story with that was a friend didn't know what to bring. She brought a box of tongue depressors and nobody wanted them. And then somebody was like, oh yeah, I can stir epoxy with mixed epoxy and then throw them away. I'll take them. And everybody was like, oh, that's a great idea. And then the box was gone in seconds. Yeah.
I have to shout out another organization out here in the Pittsburgh region that is not letting things die, which is the Large Scale Systems Museum. And I highly recommend anyone who can go take a visit. It is all supercomputers from various generations that are all operational.
No.
They're all working and they're taken care of by this crew of incredible people who are, I adore them. Fantastic values, like loving humans who are also, deeply nerding out about the computers and also eager to help researchers. So I'll shout them out here because they know all these computer languages that I had never heard of before and, have all the tools working. And downstairs is all the supercomputers and upstairs are all the personal computers, and they have every single one that has ever existed up there, just to say it, including some small robots that I didn't know, but were meant to be you have your robot that helps you around the house, these different moments and technological gadgetry, and they keep it all working. You can turn all of it on and use it, and network into supercomputers and talk to them with your current computer.
At some point, we will have to have an archivist on here to really go into detail on digital archiving, because it is a topic that I feel like all of us are probably super interested in and is also incredibly relevant to all of us as we start having work that we want to preserve or know people who do. I'm going to pivot to the next question, which is for both of you, and you can go into a little bit, which is how would you describe your own personal creative aesthetic for when you are doing live visuals, and maybe a little bit of where the inspiration comes for that?
Oh, I like that.
Whoever feels like jumping in first can go for it.
You go. No, you go. I've been talking a lot.
Yeah. So I have my own inner voice criticisms that are always there, and I sort of try to tell them to shut up. And that main voice is part of the aesthetic that I am trying to put in the world, and that is that there is a person behind that. And it goes well with the music or the theater or the thing. It works. It does this. Those are the two things. Even though there's part of me that is yelling at me going, smoother, butterier, less. But then there's part of me that's no, show the errors, show the fails, show the incidentals so that there's no question that there is a person there. So it is live. So I don't know. That's one of the things. But yeah, I also work so much with that out of the lens stuff. So I'm pretty well known for all the optical kind of things.
On a slight tangent, the last time I saw you do a show was MechaSonic, which was absolutely outrageous. Can you just talk a tiny bit about that? I'll throw a photo in there of the flames.
Lots of flames.
But yeah, how did you get? Was this the first time you worked with Mecha? This was your second MechaSonic, or?
They're good friends and they're in the neighborhood, so they're part of my community, and they have a crazy metal shop and have been doing performances there that involve where the light and the sound are all part of the performance, and they've been curating this night that's sort of grown out of the metal shop. So they sort of exploded out of it. The fire department came and was like, you cannot do this here at all. Shut us down like a week before we were going to open at that. So we moved to a venue that had all kinds of, the Chocolate Factory in Brooklyn had 5 projectors all set up kind of nicely, roughly mapped to walls, and I, very little budget, and I got 5 1080s out of one MacBook Pro M1.
The
And I was
number shoes are
like,
beefy.
it was crazy. VDMX Rock didn't crash once, 4.5 hour performance Friday night and Saturday night. And these are friends I've known for many years. During the pandemic, I really needed to get my community together because we were all isolated. So I did parking lot movies by bicycle. So the person that I did co-curated that with, so we would like roll into random parking lots in Brooklyn and project a movie and tell friends to come on bikes and stay distant, and we'd all watch fun movies together. So that's sort of how we spent our first summer in the pandemic. So these are the found family, and that's how I got involved with MechaSonic. And they keep doing stuff like, if you start following them, they're prolific. It's such, and again, it's so inspiring to me because it's very environmental. Nica, you played trumpet, and how the trumpet, you cannot turn off a trumpet. If you are in a room with a trumpet, you are hearing a trumpet, right? And these guys do that with fire and light and sound. The crescendo of the show is someone playing a piano on a forklift that is rising up while a fuse comes to it. It lights on fire and the piano crashes off of the forklift to the ground. Very punk old New York. So not really a place where projections work very well, but because they shifted venues, I was able to put photographs up and create a panorama that made you feel sort of like you were in the old venue. And that event was Willy Wonka themed, so did a bunch of Willy Wonka backgrounds and absurdist, very absurdist, rockets, rubber chickens with rockets and, fun stuff.
Yeah, actually, the visuals there I think what you were saying before is finding the thing that really kind of meshes with the whole scene. And in some cases, the visuals really do need to be intense to help carry the show. And other times, they should really just kind of, the main focus here was the fire. People were there for the fire. If you can kind of accentuate that a little bit, that's all the visuals really need to do sometimes.
Yep, exactly. And that's collaboration. That's listening and seeing and stepping back and saying, let's have this, see this on the pedestal and support that thing, and saying, and then sometimes you do the opposite.
That's right.
And you just strobe like crazy.
Sometimes you are the main focus. Yeah. And sometimes you're being that, 5% for somebody else's show to just get to the top. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Nica, same sort of a question. What is your visual style? How would you describe it? What are maybe some shows you've done that really, nail down on that?
Yeah. I would say I have a couple flavors. So I would say the main style that I had a monthly party that I ran with a couple friends in New York called WOMON, and it was a queer audio-visual party. And I was the visual, but I would also invite visual guests and often, invite people who had, some sort of practice but didn't know how to VJ. And I would teach them, and then they would VJ. Or sometimes there were different installations and things like that, like live camera installations, tabletop kind of live animation, all kinds of different things. But my visual style, I think it's really interesting because I think that my visual style is now this style that is ever present on Instagram now. But it wasn't, this is pre-Instagram when I started doing this. And it was the kind of scraping of the internet, looking for wild, wacky videos, created things, found things, strange fetish videos, and coming from a very deep appreciation for people getting really, really weird and really, really into their thing and making a video out of it and me just fucking loving it. And it also started from, and my dog's going to make an appearance, started from also just a kind of found film practice. My mother, again, was this found film person who would go to estate sales and buy other people's home movies. And my high school job was to sit in our basement, digitally transfer other people's home movies so that my mom could make experimental films from these people that she had just cast into augmented histories. So, some inspiration there. And then, she would let me keep all the dirty movies she found or the educational films or things like that. And so those were my first materials were, the created, manufactured, sometimes mass produced, 8mm films. and I would digitize them and have those as well. So it was really a collecting process, and I still collect my drive that I just like keep adding to and have backups of. That is my VJ drive. And then my practice of mixing that is this practice of kind of being a horrible person who's changing the channels all the time, like scanning through, but also finding those ways that, using different blend modes, editing, live editing. I also will use like different masking things and like Luma keys, and as well as like created masks to like have ways that these videos are all kind of coming together, clashing with each other and having these like one of a kind moments where, oh, wow, that happy accident where it's like, wow, that is amazing how that came in with that, and again, just like Chris, I do want them to know I'm doing it live, and they do not think that I am, They come up to me and they say, I want this song. Can you play this? And I'm like, I know I'm at a computer, but no. Sometimes I've, gotten snotty and been like, I hate that song. I'm never going to play that. Horrible.
That's a good comeback.
Please leave the party. But it was also, the party was like Wednesday night in Manhattan, like we really couldn't get like a prime time. And so oftentimes we would be like right after like an after work, like happy hour. And there would be like people just like making out, like all these like straight people just having a moment. And I would like find the video that I have, the Doris Wishman documentary on trans women, and there's this like scene where this person is cutting their dick off, and I play it again and again, or I'd play like medical videos of like injecting different things into penises, and I'd be like, get the fuck out of here. So it was also this way of like live community building by just, making sure that the community felt good there, and those who didn't feel good there knew that they might not want to be there. And so, it was a certain like visual space making that I really loved. And why I think of it as like something, then people like Puppy Codes came around. Do you all know who Puppy Codes is? Like, she isn't doing it actively right now, but just her Instagram, like collecting of videos, like I think she literally would scrape. I wasn't that technical. I was just looking, but she would scrape videos, and her like Instagram, like feeds of like what she found was just this other world, but it was also our world, like it was just like the world is weird and dark or funny or bizarre. I'll name drop. There's other places. I'll find my other favorite Instagrams, but I'm a big fan of like collectors. So I think that that's a main aesthetic. Then I also love. So I also joined the Joshua Light Show for a brief time while I lived in New York, and what I like deeply love about the Joshua Light Show is the building of instruments, and so. That was the real magic to me. And like, I also like, I too have various rules, and I never really wrote them out, but like the way I would combine videos and how many layers and, what would it look like, and what did I consider not right, and what did I consider right? Like, and for Joshua Light Show, they had like rules as well, but like the primary rule was that any light that hit the screen had to be manipulated and created through human hands. And so like me and my projector and my computer and my collection, it wasn't allowed. So I had to join that group and like learn about instrument making, learn how to like manipulate things. Like there was such a physicality to all of the image making. Like literally there was this tube thing that I'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Doing lights everywhere, and everything was heavy, so heavy. There was so much, and like the load-ins and the strikes, like how a strike is usually easier. It never felt easier on Josh. It never felt easier than the load-in. But yeah, big inspo and experience, and then also I really like tactile in invitational things, and it was very much inspired by my experience with Joshua Light Show. So like analog synthesizers are also a huge place of pleasure for me. And what I try to build now in my shows are I'm kind of trying to create this term for myself called social machines, and that I want participants. I want participatory invitations, and I want the like experience to be social, and that, you know, we are together, you know, negotiating what the visual is. And so for a lot of people, that means something like a knob, you know, like they don't want to come up to my computer and get like a lesson on VDMX. Honestly, like I can do that one-on-one with like another artist, and that VDMX is very accessible for that. But like when I'm at the party already, there have been a handful of people who have come up to me and learned it, but those people, they were going to find it anyways, you know. But then there's also just the person who's like, I'm never going to ever buy a piece of gear like this, you know, I don't care, but whoa, look at that, you know. And so I'll put together like a handful of tools, you know, like a V4 and 3 trims and, you know, a few things that people can actually play with. And I'll stand with them and be like, you want to try that? You know, like, you want to do that? And like, they're huge, you know, up there. And I've seen people that it's good for me because all those rules I have in my head, they break all of them and it looks good. And I'm like, oh, fuck my rules. Like, that isn't a rule. Like, you know, I never turn that knob all the way up, but I should, because it's really good, you know? So yeah, I think that describes the kind of range that I'm operating in.
That was great. I just have 2 follow-ups on that. One of them is I love using a wireless like game controller, and I'll map that out where like the buttons are all different like blaster effects, and then it'll be like next in previous clip and things like that. Yeah, you could just give it to somebody and they walk out into the crowd and they're just like playing a video game.
That would be really good.
And something you said on there touched on something that Anton and Sarah talked about a little bit briefly in our previous conversation, which was, you know, sometimes Anton was at a show once and he was amazed by the visuals, and then he went up afterwards and said, what were you doing? And they were like, I was using your plugins. And sometimes you have that, you know, and Sarah explained she had a similar sort of a thing where, you know, she was at a show, they were using something she made, her tool. And yeah, to see somebody else use your tool in a way you did not expect is like a very common through line that we hear from people. Yeah, and that's very cool to hear you throw that out there as well. So I guess we've been about an hour. I don't know if you're going to have to go soon.
No, I don't have to go until like 7:40.
Oh, okay,
I mean, 6:40. 6:40.
That's right. All right, cool. All right, in that case, we'll keep going for a little while. So my next question is, both of you have had access over the years to lots of different very weird gear. What are some of the more interesting things you've had access to, or just seen, whether somebody's using it or you've had an opportunity? What are, you know, weird gear? I know certainly when I was down visiting CMU for art and code, you had like a bunch of waiters out.
Yeah. I was wondering what you were gonna like. So there's a few things.
That's one, but you know, feel free to go off. What weird stuff?
Well, shout out to Jen Cutler, who taught me and my colleague Harrison Apple how to make Wobbulators and led us through it, and had this awesome workshop that we attended. And Jen Cutler is now at Wave Farm and also an incredible artist. And yeah, so the Wobbulator is one of my favorite toys right now. And that's what I brought to Pittsburgh Noise Fest, and had the heaviest kit. Just like, there was no ramp. It was only stairs. I was, you know, regrets, but no regrets. But it's just a, you know, say what a Wobbulator is.
We're going to insert a video.
Yeah, insert a video there. But also they have it at Signal Culture as well. But it was Nam Joon Pak and Shinto Abe, might be getting his first name wrong. But they invented it and created it in the 60s, and it is a cathode ray tube television that has been augmented with basically an extra coil to simplify all the things we did, but a cathode ray tube with an extra copper coil, but all of the coils are then connected to control voltage, essentially, so that you can control the X and the Y, and then this wobbulating third coil, which is the S coil. And so if you send waveforms into those, you are changing how the electrons are shooting through the cathode ray tube and hitting the screen. So the S coil will make things wobble, and really all of them will make it wobble. It'll just wobble in different directions, the X and the Y axis as well. But traditionally they just have an X and a Y, and the electrons are shot out, and, it has like pauses and breaks so that it can regenerate the next frame. So it still works as a television. If you don't shoot anything through those inputs, it'll play TV for you. But it's really pleasurable. And what's also like, it's one of those things where you're like, it's only happening on this screen. You can't get a video out of that. It's on that screen. And so you can point a camera at the screen. And that's, what I have done before in order to make it bigger.
I mean, rescanning in that way is,
Yep.
It's one of the techniques.
It's legit. And it's also magical because you see it on there. And I will say you also, because you have to like pump the sound, like I had to get a really powerful amp to make it do its thing. I can hear the waves. Like I can hear the sine wave, like being like, and there's no speakers. I'm not hearing sound. I'm hearing like the electricity, I guess. I'm an engineer as far as I need to be, but I'm not technically an engineer. So I'm using incorrect terms. That's a cool one. And then another one I love to play with is a thermal camera. And, I've got a few thermal cameras at the studio, but the one I love the most is just like really in that IR range where it is just kind of blobby people, shapes, but it's like hot and cold and you can like interpret it. And I did an installation at a local sauna with some thermal cameras, and it was really fun because that interaction of like the social machine doesn't have to just be like, oh, here's some knobs. It was more like, okay, you can see yourself. Like they have these huge walls and we were projecting on the walls and you can see yourself and you're the hot, and you can also be there's cold playing. You're the hot, you're the cold, like you're the instrument here. And you get to play with the visuals. And so we had like ice and we had like cold plunges, and then they had the sauna, of course. And people look really, really crazy when they're really hot, like the capillaries and everything. Like it gets visceral. I took one to a dance party, and I actually couldn't really mix it in live because people looked really bad. Like I had it pointing to the dance floor. I was like, everyone wants to feel sexy. So I kind of had like, overlaid it a bit. I never let them fully see how wild and like where the heat was. It was like a lot of points and like pits and stuff. And yeah, it wasn't attractive. I mean, it is attractive, but it was, yeah.
You should do a Halloween party or a party for predators from the Predator series, because they got to deal with that.
It's true. I mean, there's a lot of furries here, and that would be really interesting to have a furry party and just be like, where are you the hottest right now? Like, how uncomfortable is each individual furry? You could measure their discomfort with the thermal camera. Who needs a break?
Who needs a break? Chris, have you ever seen any have there been any thermal cameras at Geek Christmas that I've missed out on?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. I have this saying that everything has been put on the table. Like there's very little technology that hasn't been offered up. I mean, not like science, because that just gets into the like weird, but even that stuff too. Like a Vectrex was put on the table once, oscilloscope. So I'm trying to think. There was a thermal camera, but I think it was one of the little phone attachment
things. Those are
things.
great.
Yeah, I've never played with them much. I'm always trying to like. I mean, I've started doing this an oil set with really small clock glass. So getting into like the Joshua Light Show stuff, but I don't want to carry all that crap around. And using peristaltic pumps with an Arduino and knobs to control the flow in and out. So creating a system, that's been a really fun thing to perform with lately. And it's super portable, and I don't have to like look at a computer. I look at a computer all day. Last thing I want to do is go do a gig for 6 hours, or performance for an hour where I'm more looking at computers. So I love to, and VDMX is just so great at this too, is like turn off the computer and then play the set only looking at the screen. So never looking at the computer. That's like a goal of mine personally performing is no screen. And, it takes a long time. And Nica, I was looking at your analog video process. David, you posted a video and it was like, man, this is so much like work wiring everything and then committing to those wires, but it's the benefit of you're not looking at a screen and, to be a performer that people see and can connect to because they aren't staring at a screen is sort of a basic thing a lot of us are working on. And I see sort of a resurgence of that. Tonight, a good friend Mio, who runs Synesthesia Space, she's doing an oil set, or as they used to call it back in the day, a wet set.
Yeah. We used to travel with all those like wet pads to put around.
That's a good idea, actually.
Yeah,
I like
because
that.
when you're working with like heat and water and oil, even if you're very careful, it can spurt everywhere. And so it was like pee pads everywhere.
These are the real technical details that people are tuning in for.
Pee pads.
Yeah.
It's important for your liquid light show.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of the things that Cornelius and I have been working on for a while that we'll eventually put together as a blog post tutorial are like, what are some of the sort of, unspoken tips and tricks for the road or for shows where you've just like accumulated for me, it's whenever I'm on the road, I always bring baby wipes. You got to bring baby wipes with you. Like your hands get greasy. Baby wipes are the perfect thing for just like pulse them out, clean your hands off. And like the first tour I was on, that was the advice that somebody gave me. It was like, make sure you bring some baby wipes with you. And I was like, really? And they're like, you're not going to regret it. And they were right. They were 100% right. So yeah, we need to make like a tour tips.
Yeah. I'm learning this now. I'm like, I've just always had like those sticky hands.
Oh yes. That, and then, a good knife, because you always have to when you're tearing down, you always have to cut through all those zip ties that got done really quickly. You just got to go. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've been for years working on a process of rigging without zip ties, of course, where you can take everything down from the ground. And you're rigging a wire. Okay. We don't need to put a plastic zip tie to hold it up. It needs a paper clip, just the thing that you can then go yank and it just comes down. I think we need to start an Olympic competitions. I've been thinking about this a bit like Roadie Olympics.
Yeah.
Like 50-foot tangled HDMI cable. Go.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Gaff this crazy mess of, monster down. Or, I would watch that. That would be hilarious.
Yeah. I saw some videos of like putting tint on Windows Olympics. And for some reason, I've used a lot of like mirrored film windows. The room's darker, it expands the space, it's good for VJing. That's a good tip. But also like getting it up there like smoothly and perfectly. So they do have competitions for those folks. So I think we could maybe do could we have the cable untangling square?
Yeah.
One piece of gear that came out just like gear, while you're talking about getting so many outputs out of the M1, I just recently got, if you all know the data path and how expensive the data path is, or I'm forgetting the wall, what is the thing that takes one output and puts it to 4 that we've used forever. Anyways,
Matrix split. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's this cheap matrix splitter that works really well. I just put in the chat.
Nice.
It's this Ori brand. O-R-E-I.
I know that brand. I've gotten.
Yeah, I just got one. It's great. It's easy.
Yeah, look at that.
I just would never lose that friggin' remote though, because unless you get yourself set up to tie into it, don't lose the remote. But yeah, it works.
So much of equipment is also space and gear in space. One of my favorite and best access things was somebody donated for a Nuit Blanche 2 projectors to a projection mapping thing I was doing. And, it was a building, hit it, but I wanted to make it really interactive. So I made it all on a controller, and a friend's kid came and was on a play date with her, 10-year-old friend. I sat them down on the back of a box truck, said, here you go, here's the controller, gave them the controller, and I walked away. And I came back and they were just like eyes like this. And, to give a 10-year-old the ability to control, I think it was 22,000 lumens. That was, space and hardware. But for me, I don't, the content isn't as important to memory or takeaway as, the friends we make along the way, right? And the community and the people. Yeah. I did a performance at Feed, and for me, it was having so much space. Like, being in New York, there's so little space unless you're out on the streets. I curated art on Governor's Island for years because we had so much space that we could deal with. But, Feed is just so great because of the amount of space that you can play with. And yeah, so.
It's true. I mean, from my own personal experience, and this was something you had said earlier, Chris, where there was a guy who went out to Minneapolis because he could get a huge photo studio for a whole month and just sit there and make art. And yeah, some of my best experiences where it's like I have access to a black box space for a week and I can just do whatever I want there. There's a support crew. And yeah, you just have that freedom in that big space to really think bigger ideas.
Yeah, one project I just remembered, I had a crane company rig a swing for me in Flint, Michigan that was 72 feet high. And I couldn't have done the project. It was like LiDAR coming down in silos, but I couldn't have done that project without those guys and their insane crane.
I mean, I think that, what
like it was insane.
What also comes up for me though is also like how difficult it is to sometimes translate what it takes for me to participate. And that like I've been, on gigs or, parts of performances where the DJ sets all their stuff on my table because they think that the table is just there for them to put their stuff down. And I'm like, I gotta move this stuff. I'm gonna set my stuff up, and like, I mean, one of the instigations for putting on the art and code that you came to, David, was like that I wanted to communicate to Pittsburgh like about this medium, about this practice, as well as find the other people who are making and doing, and it's been really awesome. So many people are actually here in Pittsburgh making and doing and really supportive of each other. But I also hadn't seen that, like I hadn't really seen them out and around at things. And so, having nightclubs that actually have some kind of space and an intentionality around where projection or even just pixels can end up. I remember one night I was in this space in Brooklyn. I don't remember the name of it. And they were like, yeah, you'll be the VJ for this night. I was literally put in a room where the party wasn't at, like that, because that's where their screen was. And it was kind of the lobby. And everybody, I was like, there's no bar in here, so there are no people in here. And the DJ at the bar are in the other room. So, like, what am I doing in here, And, like, for Uomo and that party I threw every single month for 6 years, I brought the projector every time. Like that was my projector. I actually went back there and did a one-off event a couple of years ago, and they had a projector. I wouldn't say it was good, but they had one. And I was like, look at you guys growing up, but I mean, yeah, there's always been this like difficulty in translation or, even explaining like what is needed, like that and that I'm like, there's enough understanding around, oh, well, if you have a DJ and you're in this space, there's a certain amount of speakers, there's a certain amount of gear, there's a certain amount of labor that is needed for that, But then if I then say, well, I also need like 2 other people and I need this much power and I need to like, have stuff brought in, I need truss, I need, things, I'll lose jobs right away. It's done, it's gone. Because they're like, oh, I thought I'd just pay you like $200 and you do it. And I'm like, do what? I don't know if I can do it without, support, infrastructure, things. So, yeah, I mean, I have my own kit. I have forever invested my own like things. I have, some spandex that can be put anywhere. And I would travel with spandex, there's A clamps. a staple gun. I'd even travel around, like sometimes I'd have like different light bulbs to like switch out things for. Lots of power cables and stuff like that, various cable lengths, and then also often a short throw projector, just so that I wasn't like hitting people in the face. But that's a bold move to make, because then you assume where your projector placement could be. But very few people want beams in their face. So learning to be flexible, but also then I think it's getting, more and more communication is happening, more and more understanding, or at least an interest in having visual components is happening. But it's still a tough translation, and it's not always easy to explain what the hell is happening.
Yeah, I think we're always going to be arguing our art because of its ephemerality.
Yeah, I mean, the DJs are I think, it's a space that I often work in because it's also ephemeral. But yeah, Neil and I are going to work in a museum in a month together, and it's the first time the Hall of Architecture at the Carnegie Museum of Art has ever allowed anyone to project onto their plaster casts that are over 100 years old. And I had to send they're not curators, the people who take care of the things. I had to send them like some technical information about the projectors and like their interaction with the plaster, and that I will be using lampless projectors, so they emit less UV and less heat than a classic like tungsten bulb projector. And they were totally supportive and awesome about it, but they'd said no in the past, right? Didn't they say no to you, Neil?
They've had issues with it, but now you make me question if I can use the laser, which was going to be
I'll bring
I was like, the laser will definitely increase the heat, but I don't think it'll destroy the plaster.
Yeah, we should probably look into that laser.
Yeah, faster scanning. That's what I'm going to shoot for.
It's always something.
There is always something.
But I think actually what you were getting into there, and this has kind of been another thing, is that I thought both of you were great at talking about, is, going from, you're either coming to a new city and you have to find the local community that's there and find your way into it, or sometimes you're just building a community from scratch. And a big part of that, this gets back to access. It's not just access to the equipment, but it's access to a good space, a space that's going to be accommodating to your needs, to having the right crowd of people there, and things like that. So Chris and Nica, can you talk a little bit about, for people who might be interested in, there's maybe where they live, there's no community, or they're not sure how to find it, what are your kind of advice maybe to people who are young, who are looking to find a community or start their own?
Yeah, I mean, like communities aren't all that often found or started or anything on this. It so often is about physically going and being in a space, but this can also be a really good way of finding like-minded people that you wouldn't have normally been able to find, for whatever reason. And that often is an isolating thing, because if you're only finding your people, then you're only finding people that you think are yours, versus exploring who the spectrum of people are. I mean, especially when you're young, because that's really what you need to be doing, is trying different things and going and seeing. I remember when I landed in New York, and one of the first things I did was a club. It was the Tunnel. And I brought slide projectors to the Kenny Scharf room and just put them all over the place. And then let all the fucked up people, change the slides, because everybody knew how to use a slide projector. And I put motors and mirrors and did some, what was our phrase, Nica? Out of the lens?
Lens-based.
Lens-based. Ooh, I just love that. Lens-based. So lens-based stuff. So it's like, oh, I changed the slide and I see there's a person's face, or, an old car, or some, like your mom's 8mm found stuff, like go all day with that. And people just would, so a lot of the people I connected to were from that environment. And, there's always a couple people in our lives who you can trace back and say, my life would be completely different if I didn't meet that one person. Nica, you were mentioning that with someone.
There's so many.
With the school, though, with like you said, hey, I want to intern with you.
Yeah. But there's I can think of very pivotal moments and people in my life. I mean, to that end, though, I think that each one of those pivotal moments was about putting myself out there and maybe being a little uncomfortable and a little out of place. And I think that that's something that I've always like noted and like appreciated and encouraged myself to do is like, okay, I might need to be a little uncomfortable in order to like go to this thing where I don't know anyone, you know, or put this up there, even though I don't know if anybody wants it up there kind of thing, you know, or like go to that gathering. Like I you know, I'm a deeply queer person. Queer culture is my primary home. And I would go to like queer gatherings, like Homo a Go-Go, Queeruption, like these just like fantastically named things. But in those spaces, I found fellow like media people, you know, and that's how I got into porn. Is I met Shine Louise Houston at Homo a Go-Go because she was part of this queer porn panel. And the reason I went to that queer porn panel is because I was actually going to a hand processing film workshop. And I was walking there, and the person in front of me turned around and because they saw the sign and they turned around and they went, "It's canceled. Do you want to go to this queer porn panel instead?" And I was like, okay, I'll go to the queer porn panel. I kind of was more into like nerding out with celluloid and like maybe like processing with my own urine or something, but like I'll go to the queer porn panel. And then, you know, it was totally enamored with Shine Louise Houston, who does Pink Label TV, which still exists. And then like started and went up to her afterwards and said, "Hey, can I work with you?" And she hired me as her boom operator. And she's like, "Have you ever done boom operating?" I'm like, "Yes." No, I hadn't.
You should always, that's another good tip. When you're young, somebody asks you, you know how to do a thing.
Yes, you can figure out how to live data.
Do you know how to do data mosh?
You can figure out how to hold that, you know, like just, you know,
How can it be?
don't hit it on something. That's the trick.
Especially when you're making porn. Don't.
You know, stay out of the frame. Don't jostle. Those are my tips for boom operating as a professional. Yeah, I mean, putting yourself out there is a big part of it. And sometimes, you know, leaving your zone and going elsewhere if you can. I also think that, like, when I started, like, playing with media and stuff, I wasn't surrounded by friends who also wanted to do that, but I was surrounded by friends who were very encouraging, you know, and that wanted to do adjacent things. Like, they wanted to be the person in front of the camera. They wanted to make music. You know, like, I think that the fields that I've found the most welcoming are dance and music, are two, like, live performance fields that are like, yes, I think that's great. Let's try it, you know? And I like shout out to dance. Like, dancers are awesome. And the field of dance is like so truly experimental in this way that I find actually continues, you know, like, and grows and doesn't stagnate, which is really amazing to me as somebody at a conservatory drama school. You know, like, sometimes people get a little stuck in things and say, like, this is how we do it. And that's just not useful. But yeah, those are my tips. It's just get uncomfortable, put yourself out there, travel if you can, you know, and feel free to be a nerd. Like, be the nerd you are, you know, don't hide it. Be like, I'm just really into this thing. I will say that I had, you know, a lot of like there's one side of it is like lying and saying that you know something when you don't. But, you know, the other side of that coin is like imposter syndrome of like being surrounded by people who know a lot and you don't know as much. And that's just like the truth of getting into something. And now that I'm somebody who's been into something for a while, you know, I'm just so excited by people who are into it, whether they know a lot or not, you know, and that, you know, like, I think that baby Nica needed to hear that, but didn't hear that like, you know, the people who were like so impressive to me and were so welcoming to me didn't need me to actually like be an expert when I wasn't an expert, that they were probably most intrigued and invested in my curiosity than necessarily like some skill set that I was pretending to have.
Yeah, it really, like the people I've worked with who it works and it clicks. It's an openness to hearing and also suggesting though too. Like I'm not into hierarchies in collaboration, but there's a lot of instances where I have a vision and I need help to get there. You know, I did a project with it was considered the worst public space in America. They had more crime than anywhere in the country. This Hunters Point public walking bridge.
Okay.
And so some building developer wanted to put light on it. So got them to install 4 projectors, 4,000 lumens, and lit it up and made sort of a clock, an abstract clock out of the walkway. And because that goes over a rail line, the Long Island Rail needed to look at the projectors and see the amount of light coming out to know if I was going to blind a train operator. Nica, getting back to
that's a real one.
the plaster and the history. But so I don't know where I was going there. I should get going, David. I want to go see.
I was going to say
Leo.
we're about that time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go. We're gonna do a roundups and goodbyes. I think that's we're about that time. So yeah, it's perfect timing. My cat is in the background. If you can't hear him,
Yeah.
he's hungry for dinner.
I know my dog is hungry for dinner.
Yeah,
too.
I'm getting there too. So yeah. Anyway, excuse me. So yeah, thank you both so much for coming and joining us. Like I said, if you have any graphics or other videos, things you want to just have us when we put together a blog post, send it our way and we'll mix it in here. Otherwise, yeah, thank you again.
Yeah, David, this is wonderful. Nica, wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't believe I think we might have crossed paths at one point in the city, either through Joshua White or maybe through David or one of the events that you were talking about.
So we have to now.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, no,
In New York, my family's there, so yeah.
Awesome.
Find each other. And yeah, send me an invite to Geek Christmas.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or start your own. You two now are obligated to start the Pittsburgh branch.
Not a problem.
Yes. Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Well, have a great evening.
Yeah, this
Enjoy
was
your dinners. And
Thank you.
we'll be talking to you on the internets.
Yes.
Peace out.
Bye.